Hi guys, this is SDJRSNF88 speaking with the 6th instalment on Argonne Forest, my WW1 Micro Layout built in a hotel room. So welcome to another jam-packed update on Argonne Forest, and as you can see the layout has slightly grown a bit, which we'll come on to pretty much straight away after this clip. There's been lots of detailing work and adding the finishing touches really to the layout, and of course there's also been a little bit of work on some of the rolling stock and other bits and pieces as well, which we'll come on to as well in this update. So sit back and relax and enjoy the latest progress on Argonne Forest. So to kickstart this update, we're going to take a first look at the Fiddle Yard. Now this is the first time the layout has been fully assembled as one piece with the Fiddle Yard attached, and it really is sort of a very sort of easy to handle length. The board is attached with 2 screws and a butterfly nut, basically the same way that the centre boards, the way the 2 main parts of the scenic area are joined together, but except without the glue in between, which means I obviously could take this bit off so it fits back in the box. Now this board is half of one of the boards I've actually used for the scenic section. I assembled one half and then I drilled some holes in the same locations as the centerpiece on the far end of the actual scenic section, so I could bolt the 2 pieces together, and it creates this sort of really sort of easy to assemble fiddle yard. The only difficulty I'm having is with the track plan inside. Originally I was going to go for this sort of format with a siding, well 2 sidings, and this would allow a locomotive in theory with 2 wagons to sort of be stored. However, once I sort of put the stock on the track, I found that the sidings are slightly too short and the wagons and locomotives overhang at the end. So I'm having a little rethink, and I'm probably going to try and create a cassette system to sort of move the locomotives and rolling stock around in here, which I think will be a much simpler and easier option. So at the moment, I'm probably just going to run the layout with a straight section of track in there, which will be long enough to take a 3 wagon train off scene, though of course, as you can see on the scenic section, there isn't really much room for a 3 wagon train. But yeah, it's all very simple, so just simply unscrews and goes into a separate box, which I'll also have all the wiring and the rolling stock in. But a couple more details to add to this. I plan to add the layout name, which will be of course Argonne Forest, which I plan to stick on there at a future date, and obviously with a cassette system I plan to put some wires in which will connect to this board as well, and of course will be detachable. Also in the top of that board I'll also have the switch panel, which will operate the point motors, the twist lock point motors, which are of course underneath the points on the scenic section, and also the isolating switches as well. I've also managed to source some more medium green foliage and complete the forest, and I'm really pleased with how the overall effect has basically turned out. The combination of the back scene with the foliage has really given the overall forest that real dense look, which is what I was trying to capture with this sort of whole forest scene. So what I've gone and done is basically continued with the same technique, using sort of bits and pieces that have fallen off the foliage to create the ground cover, along with a few other different turfs from the Woodland Scenics range. I then used the foliage to create the trees, but I also sort of teased it out and stretched it and basically created these vines which hang down over the bunker entrances to sort of give them the effect that they've been there for quite a few years, which some of these fortifications, preceded the war. We also have the rock faces, the same technique has been used there, and yeah, it just gives an overall more of a natural feel that everything's sort of quite dense and overgrown. To the right of the board, I've also created this sort of like little gully to give the effect of like where rainwater sort of come down and sort of as it would naturally do, it would create a contour in the hillside there, and that's what I've gone and achieved there. And then it continues on around the far end of the board, where it blends in quite nicely with the edge. So I've also got round to adding a number of the details and more of the figures to the layout, and it's these little touches that really do bring the layout to life, and I'm really pleased with how they've all sort of come together at the last minute, and it was well worth the many hours I spent painting each individual item. So starting off, we've got the rest of the figures on the layout. The far right side, we got two figures which are talking to a locomotive crew, or I should say will be talking to a locomotive crew. One of them is leaning up against the cart, which has also been loaded with ammo boxes and other bits and pieces. We then have a general who is standing at the opposite end of that siding. Again, he could be talking to loco crew when a loco's parked up there, or he could be simply calling out to the troop that's emerging from the bunker opposite. I've also added another doughboy to the sort of general area where the generals are having a sort of a conversation. It looks like he's the guy that's leading the reinforcement of tanks turning up, and he's obviously gone to meet the generals and ask for his next command. And then we've also added these two chaps here, and they're on the bunker which is on the right side, and they're obviously having a little cigarette break, and they're leaning up against the walls of the bunkers there. The details I've got round to adding are of course all the many little items of trench clutter. So we got a number of sandbags, ammo boxes, Huntley and Palmer biscuit crates, among other boxes as well. And then I've also gone and added some Pico tufts. Now these started off life as the sort of wildlife tufts with a bit of sort of rocks and rubble around the bottom of them. And I chose these ones specifically because they are generally smaller tufts than the other ones in the range. So what I did was I peeled off the stones on the bottom, which was very easy, and then I simply just planted them on the mud with a tiny bit of super glue, and they really do blend in quite well. I've wedged a few on the ends of the platforms and sort of in any general area where weeds would also appear. The last thing I've gone and done is I've added a signpost just at the end of the road where the tanks are emerging. Now I'm very tempted to print off a small sign to add onto this, which on the top arrow says Amiens, and the one below it says Argonne, sort of giving the direction of those two locations. And of course, as you know, Amiens 1918 is my other World War I trench railway, so I thought it'd be a nice little reference to that. And then of course we've got the little arrow below sort of pointing on to the village of Argonne, which of course this forest would be on the border of. So as touched upon in previous updates, the layout has been coming in and out of the office at Pico, and people have been asking how I've been getting on with the progress, and of course I've been showing them while doing a little bit of work on things that I sort of can't really do in a hotel room, so like drilling out the holes for the attachment of the Fiddle Yard to the scenic section. Now in that time it's attracted a bit of interest, and while bits were drying it's been on the side in the office. And that office is the design office, and the team in there have been having a bit of a laugh with the layout. And about 2 weeks ago they informed me that they had hidden 2 sheep on the layout, and it's been bugging me for, well, a fortnight, and I haven't been able to find them until yesterday. Now one sheep is located in the woods, and it took me ages to find it. They mentioned it was in the trees somewhere, and I kid you not, I looked through these trees countless times and I couldn't find it until that moment yesterday when we were just about to do a photo shoot for a future edition of the magazine on it. And as you can see, it is wedged in behind a tree at the top of the rock face there, and it's blended in really well. Once I had found that sheep, I was then informed there was a second, and it was on the Fiddle Yard. Now, I hadn't really sort of used the Fiddle Yard until this sort of moment when I've started assembling the track work on it. To which, when I flipped it over to put the bolts on to attach it to the main layout, I noticed there was a second sheep which had been super glued to the underside of the board. And as you can see, he's just sort of hanging around there. And yeah, basically they've been on the layout for about 2 weeks and I haven't been able to spot them. So real credit to the team for hiding them there. It's all been a bit of a laugh, and I think personally I'm actually going to keep them there for the moment. So if the layout does go to any shows, you'll have to keep an eye out and try to find these sheep. I must admit, the one hidden in the trees is really hard to spot, and it actually took me a couple of moments to relocate it on the layout, which is really surprising judging by the size. But yeah, it's a bit of a laugh to them, so very funny guys, and hopefully you guys have had a little chuckle about that as well. So joking aside, I've also been working on a number of items of rolling stock, the main one of which is this. It is another Bachmann Baldwin. Now this started off life as the Snell Beach version, which I have basically detailed up and modified. Now the reason why I chose this model is I found a picture of a Baldwin on the front line in precisely the same condition, basically with an extended cab minus the lamp on the front, and without vac pipes, which the Snell Beach one doesn't have. It is one of the only ones that is currently available with all the original WDLR fittings, an extended cab and without the vac pipes, which makes it perfect for this conversion. So what did I do? I basically started off by painting the red buffer beams with a sort of homemade paint by using Humbrol smoke weathering powders mixed with a bit of matte coat and thinners, and I created a small sort of fine paint which I then brushed over the buffer beams and on the front of the running plate, and this grey effect came out very similar to the overall livery of the locomotive, so I was very pleased with how that turned out. The next thing I did was I added crew to the locomotive in the form of a Model U figure of myself and my grandfather. Now you might recognise my grandfather there as one of my team members on the Series 1 of the Great Model Railway Challenge, and this is the man that got me into the hobby. So I thought it'd be nice to have us both on the footplate posing as WDLR crew. The next thing I did, if that wasn't enough, was I then got round to adding digital sound to the locomotive. So it's a very easy task. It's simply just pop 2 screws out on the underside of the tanks, carefully remove some of the pipework and the boiler comes off, remove the blanking plate and then pop in the chip. The locomotive has already got a speaker somewhere hidden, well basically hidden in the bunker. Now the chip is from Digitrains, and I've already done a video on my previous Baldwin fitted with the sound file. It really is a good quality and sound model, so I'll pop a little link to that video on screen now as well. But the idea is, being such a small layout, I thought digital sound would really add an extra sort of level of atmosphere to the overall build. And as you can see from the stills which has sort of been playing while I've been sort of rambling on, it really does suit the scene really well. We've got it posed on a little sort of troop train which has arrived, which is using some of the Tommy figures, again from WD Models, that I assembled on one of my very first evenings in the hotel when I started at Railway Modeller back in December. So once again, I guess that's all for this update, and as always, I hope you enjoyed. And I guess possibly this might actually be the last in the main series of updates on Argonne Forest, as the layout is pretty much near complete now. Apart from the few details that I mentioned in this update, such as the layout name, the sign, and of course figuring out the configuration of the Fiddle Yard. And hopefully I'll bring you more details on that when I do get round to it. But for now, I'm guessing just running it as a sort of a straight siding will probably be the only sort of option I've got. So when I started this project a couple of weeks ago, I honestly didn't think the layout would turn out as well as it has, and it really has built up quite a following. Thanks to you guys on here, and of course on the pictures that I've been sharing on various groups on Facebook. It really is amazing the feedback you guys have sort of given me about the layout. And there's been a number of calls from you guys for me to try and get this to a number of exhibitions around the country. And I can safely say, during the construction of the layout has been invited to a number of shows. So I will keep you posted on details of those. So it's very, very exciting stuff, and it really is amazing to see that people have really enjoyed this project, and hopefully it's been an inspiration to you guys that you really don't need a small, or in this case, a permanent space to actually build a model railway. So I hope it's been an inspiration on that front. So anyway, I guess that's all that's left for me to say is this has been SDJRSNF88 speaking, and thanks for watching.